and it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of those situations coming up, and it really does take a personal analysis and a personal decision as to what your situation is personally and how you're going to handle it. So that's kind of the theme of the show, is just to discuss some of these issues and lay them out there from a financial perspective. Uh, I want to talk a little bit about, because again, it's kind of on my mind, and I usually think about the financial aspects of things, but um, you know, uh, we've had this Omicron or moronic, however you want to call it, but this new strain, and it's an interesting process because it's not the same as the other strains. It doesn't appear, and it's a weird situation because uh, a lot of us uh, are looking for symptoms and expecting to have fairly significant symptoms, high fever, severe body aches, trouble breathing, cough, um, maybe a upset stomach or diarrhea, or some issues with your stomach, and sneezing, and the whole bit. Uh, and that process has um, has been deadly to a number of people early on, and but it's interesting that, at least from what that I'm seeing out there, and I don't know if you're seeing the same thing. It appears that, first of all, it appears that they're assuming that we have that the Omicron is the current strain that's affecting us here now locally. Yet I was never tested for that, and I've asked, and they don't have any information to tell me whether that's what I had or not. Which is interesting because this last version, if this is what it is, from what I've talked to a number of people that just have had it, it seems like Christmas was the day. A lot of people got it just before Christmas, maybe out shopping or just at Christmas, and it's now carried over into New Year's, and many people, myself included, have finished the CDC approved uh, isolation period and masking period, so that we're out there now and can supposedly go back in to the public. But the difficulty, of course, with this is that they're saying that you can test positive for up to 30 days. Well, I've heard as much as 12 weeks, but at least 30 days, you can test positive from this thing after having um, at least this Omicron version. Um, and again, like I said, haven't had anybody yet who has, including the medical center. I went to Jupiter Urgent Care. I went to I had gone there a couple times, and got tested. Friend went to the fairgrounds, the different places, and as far as I know, they're not testing specifically for that variant, but they're assuming that that is the case because I guess of the symptoms that people are getting. Um, yeah, the other interesting thing is that, and I'll I don't have a problem sharing some of my medical information, just if it helps anybody else out there. Um, I had a very difficult time figuring out when I contracted uh, the virus. I took a number of home tests, and I shoved that swab all the way down into my tonsils, and so I'm pretty sure I got a good sample. Um, Although my left nostril, my brother pushed me off of a slide when I was like 6, and so I broke my nose, and you can't get one out of that side. Thank God they don't try. because it hurts like crazy. But anyway, so I did these home tests. So I'll give you a little bit of my background and just how confusing it was for me. Um, First of all, I usually have a pretty good immune system. I take a lot of vitamins normally. I take a lot of things that are good for me. I take vitamin C on a regular basis. I take zinc on a regular basis. I take vitamin D3 on a regular basis, and and then I take a number of probiotics and things like that to make sure that my system is good and all of that. So I'm pretty health conscious. I try not to eat a lot of really bad things, um, and try to supplement my food with with vitamins and other things that are designed to help with my health. Um, so, uh, so anyway, I usually, I can fight through things. I think I missed work one time in 30 years. And that was, I think it was a pretty, really bad case of the flu or something. And I probably could have still worked, but I decided I couldn't be that far from the bathroom. So anyway, I, uh, I missed that one day in 30 years. But, so I'm kind of I'm kind of used to just like pushing through stuff. But I was trying to pay attention to this thing, and um, but I'm having a difficult time determining where where I got it from and when I got it, and because some things are just don't make a lot of sense. So, for example, the 14th of December, I went up to Tallahassee. Now, that's a long time ago, 14th of December. I went up to Tallahassee for a meeting up there. I was fine. I was up there and I was fine. Nobody that I know up there had the coronavirus at the meeting I was at. Uh, that was for those of you that may listen to the condo show. That was that meeting we had with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So, anyway, I was up there. Couple people had a virus that was going around um, among their kids, and but not the coronavirus. They had been tested. But anyway, so as far as I know, nobody up there had it, and as far as I know, I didn't have it. But I I was staying at a hotel up there, and I remember now thinking back, both the 14th and the 15th, when I was staying up there, I kind of couldn't get the temperature in the room regulated. It just seemed like it got hot during the night, and it wasn't a very good air conditioner, and so I just chalked it off to, well, it's just the room, and I didn't think more of it, and then got back on the 16th, and actually wasn't didn't really feel bad. I had a fever though. I started running a fever about 102 uh, at night. And then during the day, it would kind of go away. So on the 17th, I took a home test. It came out negative. On the 18th, I went to Jupiter Urgent Care and had both a COVID test and a flu test. Both of those turned out negative. What I just found out is that they also did a PCR test, which I didn't realize that. And if you're getting tested, you should have that done because that's the one that they send out and it takes 24 hours to get back in or whatever. But it is the only, it is very reliable. So anyway, so on the 18th, which was a Sunday, I had, uh, they both turned out negative. They told me they thought potentially that I might have some sort of a virus, but not COVID. So that was on the 18th. I was also tested to make sure I didn't have some sort of other infection, urinary tract infection, or anything like that. That came out clean. And so, all I had was a fever, and that fever had gone away by the 20th or so, that next Tuesday. So it was gone. I went 24 hours with no fever. Um, so that would be on Wednesday, the 23rd. And, and I was, again, that was weeks into, 10 days into it at least. Um, So and I felt fine, no temperature, no cough, nothing. And then um, I was pretty good. I mean, I'm fine that day, Christmas Eve. Felt pretty good. Didn't notice anything. I always have trouble with the allergies when the weather changes, so I might have sneezed a couple times, but not really a cough, nothing like that. And then uh, and then Christmas Day, um, I started in the afternoon, started having a little bit of a cough and an occasional sneeze. And then by dinner time, though, I was kind of coughing a little more, so I could tell I was, not right at that point. And so I went home that night um, and had a horrible night. But not trouble breathing. I didn't ever have, the feeling that I was, had an elephant sitting on my chest or that I couldn't catch my breath. But I couldn't sleep at all because I was coughing. It was one of those, shallow coughs, not what you'd call a productive cough where you're getting up a lot of say. It was kind of a shallow cough, and in fact, I remember when I woke up the next morning, I felt like I'd done crunches all night because my stomach muscles had hurt so much from trying to stop me from coughing because my lungs hurt so bad that when I coughed, the lungs hurt so bad that my stomach wanted to stop it, um, because it hurt. So, and I remember I had a fever about 102 and a half or 100, almost 102.7 or something like that. And so I knew I had at that point, I had a pretty good idea when I woke up that morning that I had COVID. So again, I took I took a test. I took a home test, and it showed up positive. Now, between the test I took at Jupiter Urgent Care and that last test I took um, on Christmas Day, or the day after Christmas, I'm sorry. Um, I took 3 other tests, home tests in that period of time, all of which turned out negative. So all of the time that it was there on the Wednesday, on Christmas Eve, I took those tests and came out negative. So, uh, and then again, like I said, took the home test on the day after Christmas. By then, I didn't have the next night. I had some coughing, but wasn't too bad. My fever had gone down. I was down, under 100, and stayed that way and have stayed that way since. Haven't run a fever. I went in the 30th of December. I had been isolating that whole time. Went in the 30th of December and had a another test done at the Jupiter Urgent Care, and it came back positive for COVID, negative for the flu, and they also did that PCR test, which also came back negative. I mean, came back positive. I also got the result of my PCR test from the first time that I went to. That came out on the 3rd of January, and it was negative from back on the 18th. So somewhere between the 18th, I guess, and the day after Christmas, the 26th, I developed I developed COVID. I was exposed. Now I know a couple people that got it um, during that period of time, but between the time that I was in contact with those people and the time my symptoms started was less than 24 hours. So it's hard for me to believe that I could have caught it from someone that quickly. Um, the thought from the professionals I've talked to is that it was potentially um, Christmas Eve or the day before that. So maybe out shopping. Although, as the medical professional I talked to from the health department said, you have to really be around somebody in their space for about 15 minutes or more, unmasked. And so um, when I was shopping, because of having what I was told was a virus, not COVID, I was still cognizant of being around people, so I really wasn't around a lot of people. But somewhere, someplace, I got it, and I either had it before and was asymptomatic, or have it, at some point I got it. The difficulty is that this, and I'm sure that the reason that this virus spreads so much is that, um, there's really, it is, in most people, it's very asymptomatic. Um, or when you get the symptoms, they're not all like, like you hear about. You only get a few of them. And I've talked to a number of people now that have had COVID over the holiday, over the Christmas New Year's holiday, and they all kind of feel the same thing, that, potentially, um, that you that they that they didn't really have much in the way of symptoms. Now, uh, it's interesting because some of those people were vaccinated, some were unvaccinated, but kind of had the same response. Some of them took the monoclonal antibodies, some didn't. Um, and the the economics of that is interesting, by the way. Um, and that's where I, have a hard time with the science, and I'll put that in quotation marks, is because, obviously the science has morphed now, affected by the finance. Um, we don't have test kits right now, because basically the government wasn't willing to pay for them. Now I'm not. This has nothing to do with politically, whether they should have done this or just that. It's all finance and economics. The reason things get done is because a business is willing to do it because they're getting paid for it. When the government decided to back off on the number of tests that they were going to purchase back in January of last year, um, and didn't purchase as many of those kits, um, the stores started uh, uh, producing less because the kits had to be purchased. The government wasn't buying them, and then there was and the at some point the COVID process was slowing down. People weren't taking as many home tests, so it's just pure economics. The business wasn't going to push money and costs into a product that they weren't sure that they were going to get paid for, and so now there's not enough tests. Now, you could say, well, from a political standpoint, you could say, well, the government should have been wise enough to understand that. And if they knew there was going to be a need over these holidays to have tests, they should have committed to purchase a certain number of tests, including potentially making advance payments so that the labs could ramp up and have those tests ready to go. That's a political decision. The economic decision is on the part of the business saying, is there going to be enough illnesses out there that I'm going to get my money back if I produce 50 million or 100 million of these tests? They obviously made the decision that no, that was not going to be the case. Frankly, probably a bad decision on their part, because as far as I know, there's a whole lot of people out there wanting to buy test kits, but they're a business. They didn't want to make a bet that could put them out of business by betting that there was going to be a continuation. And in fact, they were being told by the powers that be, the CDC and others, that we've got this under control. We're going to have this handled, and it'll be done. So their people are saying, yeah, looks like we're not going to need these tests that much, especially if all this is under control. So that was the economics of the transaction, and there's always some economics in the transaction. In this COVID situation right now, in the Omicron, it's interesting because there's a lot of economics in this transaction that are impacting the health care that you're receiving. For example, it certain places you can't, you couldn't get tested, or if you did, it was hours and hours and hours. Even if you were willing to pay for it, it was still impossible to get in line and get it tested. I think the second time, on the 30th of December when I had the positive test at Jupiter Urgent Care. um, I had you had to go and register and then leave the building. You couldn't stay in the building if you were there for being tested. You couldn't leave. You couldn't stay inside the building. You had to go outside and stay in your car. And it took about an hour and 45 minutes for me to get my turn. And then, we'll say they did a really good job. They spent a lot of time with me asking questions. When did you do this? When did you have these? When did you have symptoms? Do you have symptoms? Um, but what's happening, and so that was an expensive process. That was an expensive process for the Jupiter Urgent Care, and the fact of the matter is they were shut down for some period of time because of staffing. So they didn't have staffing, and so there were at least 2 or 3 days that they were behind because they couldn't treat anybody because they were closed down over the uh, New Year's weekend. So, um, or I'm sorry, it was over the Christmas weekend, over the end of the Christmas weekend. So the so so they the testing companies made an economic decision, probably a bad one right now, but for their company, probably one that they couldn't afford the risk without subsidy. The other thing that I find is interesting is that you can get the vaccine. You can get the vaccine. You can get the booster. I had both vaccines, had the first shot March 9th, second shot April 9th. So I had both vaccinations. Um, and and then but uh, and the vaccines are readily available. You can go get them. They don't cost anything. Yet for a while here in Florida, until DeSantis stepped in, if you wanted the monoclonal antibodies, which would save your life, um, you couldn't get them, or they were $450, $500. So isn't this crazy? They're giving you a vaccine which they kind of admit right now may not be doing any good to keep. We've got tons of breakthrough situations now. I think my vaccinations still potentially helped me shorten the period of time maybe that I was sick. I don't know that it reduced my symptoms as much, because in talking to other people that have had the virus right now, their symptoms were same as mine in terms of how severe and how not severe and how asymptomatic. Um, but I did only have severe symptoms for only a day and a half, which is amazing. So and like I said, now I'm good. I still got, I guess I don't have any fever. I haven't had a fever for 10 days. And I occasionally I feel like I could cough if I wanted to, but it's not like I'm gonna cough. You know what I mean? So here we are. I You go through that process now. You kind of wonder about the political process, when politically they're encouraging you to get a vaccination and they don't want you to use the therapeutics. So they make the therapeutics so expensive that you can't afford it and you die. That doesn't make sense to me. That's a problem. That's a political maneuver. That is not a financial maneuver, because they know that the monoclonal antibodies have a significant impact on reducing the symptoms and or reducing the length of time that somebody's sick, even if they haven't been vaccinated. And from what I've understood, because I know a number of people um, who are unvaccinated or who didn't get the booster or whatever. And everybody is telling me that if you get that, if you get the monoclonal antibodies within a certain period of time, um, that like an hour later, you've got about a 70 or 80% improvement, and that it reduces the time period that you're sick considerably, from 10 days to 2 days or something like that. I think of it similar to the flu medication you take from time to time. It doesn't get rid of the flu, but a lot of times it reduces the period of time you're sick from a couple weeks or a week, 10 days to 2 or 3 days. Um, so 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 like I said, I've talked to a couple people. They've had the monoclonal antibodies, but now are having trouble getting them. They are being scheduled. Supposedly, they're supposed to be scheduled to your doctor. Um, but you can, and I could have gotten those scheduled. But I decided not to have the monoclonal antibodies because my symptoms were gone by then. They came and went so fast that um, but that frankly, I knew there were no monoclonal antibodies out there, that people were having trouble getting it. And I much rather have somebody get it that needs it, that, maybe has some underlying issues or, wasn't vaccinated or whatever, that might be suffering a little bit more than I was. And so for me, it was a decision that I made, uh, not a financial decision because it would have been paid for by my insurance at that point or by DeSantis. Um, so it was really just a decision relative to, the population as a whole. Um, Unfortunately, because financially, the government didn't plan for the economics of this, that, people look at this thing and they say, what was the difference between what what Biden how Biden has handled this coronavirus and how Trump handled the coronavirus. Of course, it was a different situation because there were no vaccines out there at the time, and there were no and there wasn't much in the way of treatment out there for it if you contacted it, and the symptoms were very, very, very severe, and people were dying, and um, COVID pneumonia was pretty popular and pretty widespread. I've got friends that died from this thing. So certainly, and those friends were vaccinated and boosters and still died. So so it's a deadly thing, but but I think the difference between the Trump administration's approach and the Biden's approach is that Trump is a business person and he understood the economics of the the virus. Biden's administration doesn't understand the economics of the virus. They really didn't fully understand it. They didn't understand that if the government didn't do certain things, Pfizer and Moderna and those they weren't and J&J, they weren't going to do those things. They weren't going to take those risks. Trump knew that as a business person. If there's a way to slough off some of your risk, diversify some of your risk, if you've pre-sold three-quarters of your condo units in your high-priced condo building, you don't have as much risk as if you've got none pre-sold and you're going out of the ground on the building, right? So same concept here. If Pfizer knows that they've got 30 million um, tests guaranteed, then they're going to spend the money because they know they've got 30 million sales, right? So they know they're not going to lose money. It's not going to cause them to go under. They're still going to make decisions relative to how fast they deal with this issue, and what kind of resources and what kind of testing they do. But they at least know that they can spend the money because they've got a guaranteed sale. They've got pre-sales is basically what it boiled down to, and that's what's going on. Um, you know, Now it's the same thing. It's the same situation. It's the economics is that if the Food and Drug Administration is not encouraging the use of by supporting financially the purchase of monoclonal antibodies, those companies are not going to produce those. They're not going to produce those antibodies because at that point they're going to produce them, but not in the quantities necessary to help everybody. They're going to produce it in the quantities necessary that they think that people can afford it. So the wealthier people who have good health care or who have money and can afford to pay the $450. Like I said, if the governor hadn't stepped in, you'd be looking at that. I mean, it's a blatant economic position. Take the vaccine, it's free. Take this that saves your life, and you got to pay $450. So if you don't have $450 because you're poor, or unemployed or sick, um, too bad you die. And that's actually what the Biden administration has said. Take the vaccine, we'll let you live. If you want to try to treat this and don't take the vaccine, you die. Now, I said at the start of this whole thing that all of this is a very personal decision. I made a very personal decision whether to take the monoclonal antibodies. I could probably afford to do that. If I had to pay for it, I could afford to do that. I will pay for my health. It's important to me. So I could have done that. I could have taken that step. I chose not to because I felt like I have, I'm doing pretty well. I wasn't going to have a problem. I tell you, I am a little concerned about the testing process for these boosters and how much or how well they've been tested. I worry a little bit about the information that was released recently about blood clots in the J&J vaccine. That in particular was something I was considering because I had had a problem, a heart incident. I don't know what it was. They said it could have been a blood clot. That was before all the COVID things. But it certainly, if there's a predisposition in any of these vaccines to blood clots, I was a little bit worried about that. Taking the first vaccines at the time, I felt like the risk of that versus the risk of contracting COVID and dying, that there was a greater risk of contracting COVID and dying. So I took the original vaccines. Looking back on it now, would I? I don't know. Knowing what I know now and the fact that there's treatments for it, I may not have taken that risk. But for me, it didn't seem to hurt anything. Not sure if it helped. I think maybe it might have reduced my time that I was sick under this Omicron, but maybe not. They say the vaccine doesn't really help the Omicron. So it's a very, very difficult process, and that's why I can't understand how the government, whether it's the federal government or the state government, frankly, can think that they can figure out, for me personally, based on my health statistics. I know there's no way that there's somebody sitting in the CDC thinking about Mark Breckbill going, gee, Mark had that heart incident previously, and probably he might, maybe he doesn't want to, he shouldn't take the booster, and now that he's had COVID, he probably definitely shouldn't take the booster, because he probably's got some natural immunity. Maybe, nobody's thinking like that. Nobody's thinking like that, right? The government isn't doing that. I don't want them to do that, but they're not doing that, um, because at the same time they're thinking like that, I'm thinking compassionately how they might be thinking. They might be thinking, Mark's 66 years of age. Let's let the son of gun die. Who cares? Who gives a crap about him? He's a drain on the economy. He's going to be more Social Security and more Medicare. He's just going to get sick. And maybe he's going to have a blood clot. We have to deal with that. So let's just forget about it. Let's not have the guy get vaccinated. Let's let him die and go. Um, but, those are the kind of things that that are economically taking place. Nobody's standing there saying, I'm going to let Mark Breckbill die. But there were a lot of decisions made on economics, on the financial aspect of this virus. And trust me, there is a huge, huge financial aspect to this virus. Many, many, many big pharma companies are surviving or not based on what they did or how they've done during this coronavirus. And um, and some of them, uh, like how many people are actually getting a J&J? How many people are actually getting the J&J vaccine at this point? There were a lot of people that were waiting for that because it was one shot. Thought, okay, might not have the side effects, and yet after they'd released it, after a bunch of people have had shots, they now come out and say, well, if you have an issue with blood clots, you may not want to take the J&J shot. That's interesting. Uh, so this, whatever you want to say about this thing, there's a financial aspect of this that goes with the political aspect of it, and how intrusive the federal government and the state government are in in the healthcare process determines what kind of healthcare you will have, and that's exactly what's happening now. So I kind of wanted to go through all of this just so that you could get a perspective. Some people may not have a perspective. They may not have talked to anybody. They may not know anybody that individually that's had the coronavirus, or maybe people aren't willing to share. A lot of people don't want to share if they did or didn't have the vaccine. All of those kind of things. Um, so I kind of wanted to share this with you, but it is a confusing process, and I think you're going to have to make a decision on your own. And you've probably got about a 4-day window to make that decision. Because some of these things, the monoclonal antibodies, seem to work very, very well if they're taken within 2 days and up to about 6 days after symptoms start. So, again, based on my situation, when did symptoms start? I don't know. I mean, I think it was Christmas night, but it's hard for me to tell. It could have been as early as 4 or 5 days before that, maybe, um, or maybe even before that. Um, so you know, don't be afraid. That's the only thing I'm going to say is don't be afraid. Fear, anxiety causes it, it helps cause a more severe reaction. Um, so so don't get caught up in the anxiety of it. This is not a death knell. The good thing about this Omicron is it does appear that that's what's hitting people. It is very, very contagious, so you're probably going to get it. But if you get it, hopefully, like the majority of the people that I'm talking to, you will either be able to treat it with the monoclonal antibodies and you'll minimize the severity of it, or um, you won't get it as severely anyway, um, because of either what you've done in the past, or your own system, your own body and its ability to fight this thing. So don't don't be afraid of it. Um, but it is going to have an impact. We're going to see significant amounts at this point of positive tests. Now, you know, we've now found out that, again, like I said, there's economics behind this. Biden's not shutting down the economy because he knows that he's already in trouble. If he shuts down the economy again, we're doomed. So all of a sudden now the CDC has decided that the the time in which you need to quarantine has been substantially reduced. It's no longer 10 days. We're now down to 5 days. And it's really confusing here because I thought it was 5 days with no symptoms. You have to isolate 5 days, no symptoms. No, it's 5 days from the time that you were in contact with somebody who was positive or you developed symptoms. You got 5 days is all that you've got to quarantine, not quarantine, isolate. And then after that, you're supposed to wear a mask for another 5 days. So um, which I'm not sure what kind of masks, because there's not enough masks of the kind that do any good out there. So again, an economic decision. People stopped producing those masks because they didn't want the general public to get it. There was a run on those masks. And so now they tried to convince everybody that the cloth masks would work just as well. And now they're kind of backing away from the cloth mask. So I don't know what mask you wear for the last 5 days. Just wear a mask. But but uh, um, but that's the current guidelines. They were effective the day after. They went into effect either the day before I got tested on the 30th or the day after. Those had changed, and so now it's 5 days isolation from the time you start coming down with it or exposed to it. 5 days isolation, and if you don't have any symptoms, if you've been exposed and no symptoms, you don't even have to isolate. But if you've been exposed and have symptoms, you're supposed to isolate 5 days for 5 days from the date that you have symptoms, not from the date that you stop having symptoms. And then you've got another 5 days after that that you're supposed to wear a mask. And my understanding is there's no use going out and getting a um, no use going out and testing to determine whether you're negative, because under this virus, at least, they're saying you'll test positive for up to 30 days. So you're not going to get a negative test to go back to work. You're gonna test positive. So you kind of have to follow the CDC guidelines, I guess, is what we're looking at. But I think the big thing is look at your situation, look at your risk factors. Do you have people in your family who even with a mild case of coronavirus could have problems? You've got to make decisions for yourself and your family and the risks that are associated with your family. So that's what I would say relative to this as we're looking at it. And hopefully, economically, you're not going to be affected by some of the decisions that are made. Although you already have been affected by the fact that you can't get a test kit, and you may not be able to get monoclonal antibodies here very shortly, as I understand that the FDA has not released the required dosage to Florida, at least, where I think somewhere in the range of 18,000, something like that. I forget what the number is. I think we had asked for uh, 12,000, and then we had asked for 30 and we got 12 or something like that. But anyway, so you know, and then the other thing I would say is have a plan. Have a plan. Know what you're going to do. Who are you going to isolate from? Do you want to pre-isolate? If you think that this is a that this is there's a really good chance you're going to get COVID, and I think there is a really good chance a lot of people are going to get COVID as a result of this Omicron, then maybe you should be isolating a little bit for those people in your family that have risk factors. Maybe if you've got an elderly parent, maybe if you've got a pregnant daughter, if you've got somebody like that, maybe you should be taking extra precautions, extra care. Um, and looking at that. You should maybe be in contact with your healthcare professional. Discuss with your healthcare professional. Are you going to take the monoclonal antibodies? Should you take those, or does your body have other issues that might be more impacted by the monoclonals? Or are you going to wait and see how severe it is? Those are the kind of things that I think you can do to take your healthcare back and to take it into your own hands. Know where you're going to be. Know what you're going to do. So that's kind of where we're at. I think that's kind of the economics of it. I don't claim to know the science of it. I don't think anybody else does either. At this point, I think there's a lot of very good professionals that have a difference of opinion, and that's fine. Um, Science is partly different people having different theories and testing them out, and until they've gotten a conclusive test, then it'll be a theory, and qualified people have different theories. But anyway, so hopefully you can handle it. Don't be afraid. you know have a plan. Talk to your healthcare professional in advance. Know what you're going to do. Know what's going to happen and how you're going to approach this. Look at what risk factors you have in your family. Look at what risk factors you have personally. Look at what other health things you're doing. Are you taking zinc? Are you taking, the vitamin C? Are you taking the vitamin D's? A lot of people say that that's made a difference. Those kind of things. Are you looking and doing those? But now's the time to plan. Don't wait until you're middle of it when you're afraid, because there isn't any reason to be afraid of this one. You just got to plan and be ready. All right. Well, that's it for the new year. I'm encouraged. I think we're going to have a good year. I think this Omicron may be the end of the coronavirus as we know it, and that could be a really good thing. So, anyway, we'll be back again next Wednesday right here on WSTU, talking about some of the economic issues that are going on and giving you an update on some of the things we see in the community. Hopefully you'll join us. We appreciate you being with us. And we're here, like I said, for you. So join us on WSTU Digital 1450. We're Martin County's really ancient station.
It's time. It's time. It's time now for the case.
Just listen to what I said. Don't be afraid. Have a plan.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the